Okay, ready. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. First of all, are there any apologies for absence, Emma? No,
Chair.
No, everybody's here. But Pat, Councillor Bosworth.
Sorry, so Councillor Bosworth is substituting for Councillor Hope, sorry.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bosworth. Okay, item 2 is to approve the correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of March. Has anybody got any comments? Councillor Sam Smith, you're just moving them? Okay, thank you. You got a seconder? Yep, all in favour? Great. Okay, that's that done. Okay, are there any declarations of interest today? Nope. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the programme of portfolio holder attendance, but before we move on to Councillor Wheeler, I've got an update from last time. Actually, it wasn't last time, it was the time before when Councillor David Ellis was here. We've got an update about we asked about stats about dog fouling. So we just got some facts here. So last year was the best year for catching dog fouling and issuing fixed penalties. There were 10 in total between April 21 and March 22. All the fines were £100 and they've all been paid. The previous best was the year before, 2020 to 21, where 3 fixed penalty notices were issued. The number of fines issued has increased due to a higher number of CCTV reports. And just to confirm, DNA was not taken from any case. So has anybody got any questions about that? It's an interesting update. Okay. So now we are going to move on to today's portfolio holder, which is Councillor Henry Wheeler, who is the portfolio holder for Housing, Health and Wellbeing, and he's got a presentation to show us. So over to you, Henry.
Thank you. Hello, good evening. Nice to see you all. Thank you. Okay. You can hear me now, can't you? Yeah, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so I've put a presentation together based on some of the sort of peripheral sort of questions that came from yourselves via Emma. So I'll go through that, but there's just a quick overview in terms of the areas of responsibility as well, which I usually do every time I come here. Thank you. So, which one's this one? This one. Is it working? Is it working? Oh, behind me. It's not working. Sorry. Right, okay.
It's not showing.
Is it behind me then?
It's not showing.
Oh, there we go. Right. Has it come up? Yeah. Oh, crikey. Yeah. So housing, health and wellbeing, and obviously myself, Councillor Henry Wheeler, portfolio holder for housing, health and wellbeing. Okay. Areas of responsibility within the housing, health and wellbeing portfolio. So we've got leisure centres, sports, development lead for sport and physical activity, health promotion and development, liaison with public health and clinical commissioning group. CCG South Nottinghamshire Primary Care Network, homelessness and housing needs, council housing development, although that sort of crosses over with Councillor Hollingsworth portfolio within economic development. Housing and council tax benefits, council tax reduction scheme and the ongoing sort of transition to universal credit, and then obviously the Bonington Theatre and Cinema. Okay. So there was a sort of question that came which was around the Nottinghamshire Health and Wellbeing Board in terms of using my position in terms of influence or finding out the state of GP numbers in Gedling Borough. So I'm just going to put some context on the Health and Wellbeing Board. The Nottinghamshire Health and Wellbeing Board is a statutory public health function that aims to find out what Nottinghamshire needs. The board is currently reviewing its strategy for 2022, and GPs fall under primary care provision, which is not a public health function. The governance for GP provision falls under the umbrella of the emerging Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Integrated Care System, which is ICS. And GP surgeries are part of the local primary care network. network structure of the ICS, Integrated Care Partnership. Okay, so there are 4 primary care networks that sort of cross the boundaries of Gedling, sort of operate across Gedling. We have Borough, primary care network, which serves Bestwood Village, Papwick and Limby. Also happens to serve Hucknall in that area as well within Ashfield. We have the Arnold and Calverton PCN, which serves Arnold, Calverton surrounding villages. Oops, sorry, go back. We got the Arrow PCN, which serves Colton, Daybrook, Mapley, Burton Joyce. We've got Synergy Health PCN, which serves sort of Carlton, Mapley, Netherfield and Burton Joyce, also serves Loudham as well. Okay, so the latest figures provided by the Nottingham and Nottinghamshire Clinical Commissioning Group show there are 107 GPs working locally within this structure. Okay, so we got the Byron, which is Bestwood Village, Papwick and Limby, and there's 4 practices there, GPs, 4 practices. And we've got the, I can't quite read that because it's sort of skewed off. So yeah, Oakenhall Medical Practice, the Surgery, Tockhard Hill Medical Centre. There's 25 GPs and 4 practices. Well, it should say 25 GPs, 4 practices, okay. And we have the Wyburn Medical Practice. Okay. Arnold and Calverton PCM, we've got 31 GPs and 3 practices. And these are the Calverton Practice, the Highcroft Surgery, Stenhouse Medical Centre. And then in the Arrow PCN, we've got 34 GPs and 6 practices. Why is that not coming up? Sorry. Has it come up? Why is it not coming up?
Is it behind you?
It's behind me, is it? Oh, right. Oh, here we are. Right. Arrow, 34 GP, 6 practices. So we've got Daybrook Medical Practice in there. We've got the Ivy Medical Group, Peacock Practice, Plainsview Surgery, Unity Surgery and West Hill Lane Surgery. Within Synergy, we've got 17 GPs, 3 practices. And these are the Jubilee Practice, Trentside Medical Group and West Oak Surgery. Okay, so I'm going to go on to, is there any questions on that? Sorry, Councillor Paley.
Not a question, Henry, but I'd just like to say that at the last meeting of the My Local Practices Patient Participation Group, we were told that we'd had 2 long-term vacancies for resident GPs. Resident GPs, in our practice terms, if nowhere else, I don't know, are newly qualified GPs, but we just can't recruit them.
Yeah,
And I thought I'd bring that.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it is a significant problem across Nottinghamshire, actually. The information that I've actually passed on has got quite a lot of statistics and figures in there. It's got the actual figures for GPs practicing, but also other staff practicing across Nottinghamshire more widely. So there's quite a lot of information in there to divulge. It'd take me far too long to go through it on here, actually. So that's why I've given that information. It's at the back of a report.
Councillor Murray.
Henry, forgive me. To what extent is it a problem that health areas don't map exactly onto the borough? I just noticed that we haven't, in your list of GP practices, included any of the Ravenshead doctors. Because the Abbey Medical Group is, of course, split between Blidworth and Ravenshead, and I imagine it therefore falls, I don't know, into your colleague at Newark and Sherwood District Council, but you haven't provided us with the details. Is that the sort of thing that's a problem?
It's quite complicated because of the way the primary care networks have been constituted and set up across the county. I don't know if Lance has got anything else you want to add to that. Sorry.
Yeah, Lance Dewey, Head of Communities and Leisure. So, yeah, it's an interesting point, actually. So the Ravenshead practice falls into what's called Sherwood Primary Care Network, which falls into the what is the mid-Nottinghamshire structure, which kind of highlights that challenge, isn't it, around the boundaries aren't neatly set against the district local authority boundaries. So I suppose a lot of our working is within the South Notts area. So I think there's practices in Loudham that fall in South Notts as well. So you can see there's kind of that weird interaction across those boundary areas. But yeah, just for clarity, it is an issue, and I think we work with NHS colleagues in terms of being clear to them, well, actually, it's not always helpful when those boundaries don't fit. But again, that is a top-down NHS structure that we have to sort of work within.
Councillor Ellis?
Yes, at the risk of repetition, I imagine the same thing applies to the St Albans area.
No, it's okay.
Thank you. There's sort of a couple of sort of points come out of that. One is how much influence we have over these systemic and sort of structural things, presumably not an awful lot. And then the second question, which is sort of allied with the first two as well, if there are a problem with recruiting newly qualified GPs to work in our structures, if that's a problem, is that a problem with just resources? And again, presumably Gedling Borough as an authority doesn't have an awful lot of say in that either.
We have no jurisdiction whatsoever over what the clinical commissioning group do or the primary care networks. I think probably useful actually if Scrutiny invited the CCG in to discuss those issues because there are issues ongoing across the borough but also across the county in terms of the way that things have been constituted and structured. And also I think it might be useful for them to probably come to Scrutiny to ask some of the questions around resourcing and staffing issues as well. So that's something that I can pass those details on. The people that would be relevant to come here to talk about those issues, and you'd probably get a more comprehensive answer with regards to those questions.
Yeah, it's very useful. Thank you, Henry. Yeah, do you want to carry on?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so. The next question that was sent was how do developer contributions from new housing developments feed through into investment into GP provision? So developer contributions and general practice context. So I'm just putting a few contexts on it. So Gedling Borough Council consult the Clinical Commissioning Group, or CCG ICP Integrated Care Partnership, which was formerly the Primary Care Trust. On all planning applications received. This applies to any major residential development of 10 or more new dwellings and any new residential institution such as a care home. When consulted, the CCG assessed the likely impact of the new resident population created by the development in terms of the number of additional GP consultations, and the calculation is based on a methodology which is provided by the Department of Health and takes into account infrastructure accommodation requirement for consulting and treatment rooms. So, developer contributions and general practice. Sorry, it's quite a bit in here. Continue. So, it's not permissible for any contribution to be sought for staffing costs. The clinical commissioning group consider which practices are most likely to be affected by growth. Directly related to the proposed housing development. One or more practices are usually identified in a particular locality. The CCG seeks to justify a contribution where it can be demonstrated that existing practices in a particular locality are at full capacity, and from a health perspective, new infrastructure will need to be developed to accommodate the increased population. Consultations with the CCG also provide details of emerging plans to address capacity issues and seek to justify the contributions sought are fairly and reasonably related in scale and kind to the development.
We've got some questions first at Councillor Paling first.
Again, it's a comment. Being a member of planning committee, we have, not me alone, have often commented that we are surprised about the lack of requests in the planning, particularly for the larger developments. I think the only major one has been the Netherfield one.
I'm going to show you some of the monies that are held. So I'm going to come on to that. So we've got healthcare-related capital contributions held.
I've got another question, Henry. Do you want that first? Michael, is it relevant, Michael Boyle?
Yeah, it is. It's about the matrix to which you refer from the Department of Health about how they come up with how many more doctors you might need or extra consultations. I just wondered, well, you may not know, but I just wondered how much that takes into account the demographics and the proposed development. So, for example, if you were to build an area which is predominantly going to be 65 plus, that might have implications for a number of consultations you might need as against some more general development, for example.
Yeah. Again, I think that's a question that needs to come from the CCG, from the Clinical Commissioning Group, in terms of how that happens. Like I said, they would probably be a far better placed to sort of answer those sort of questions around the Department for Health calculations and demographics. So I think, you know, if they came to scrutiny, that's one of the questions that they'd probably be able to give an answer to. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to come on to the Section 106 sites and the monies that are held. So these are healthcare related capital contributions held as 31st of March 2021, and it shows the deadlines on there for each. I don't know if you can see that. I can read them off. So land at Wigay Road, for example, there was money received, Section 106 2016, there's 21,741. There's a deadline for 2026 on that for expenditure. Land at Stockings Farm, Section 106 2016, 4,335, 232,000. And deadline for that is 2026. The next one's Bradston Drive. Again, you know, there's Section 106 that was received in 2017. There's a deadline in 2027. I won't go through all the figures, but you can see there. But it's land of, I know you can't read it on here. There's land at Papawick Lane, north of. Again, there's a deadline there for 2027. Section 106 received 2017. Land at Till Close, 2019, received deadline 2029.
Can I ask you a question, Henry, about that?
Sorry.
Is that the total contribution that's held?
Yes, that's it. That's the contribution
106.
held for each, each site.
Covers lots of different things.
It does, yeah. So
Okay.
I'll come at the end and it'll have a total, should have a total for all of those Section 106 contributions.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
okay, so I know you can't read it there as well. Land west of Westhouse Farm, there was a contribution received in 2019 and the deadline for expenditure is 2029. Land north of Papawick Lane, 2020, there's a deadline for 2030 for expenditure. Bradston Drive off Spring Lane, received 2020, Section 106, again, deadline for 2030, and finally land at west of Mapley Plain. There was Section 106 received 2020, and then there's a deadline there for 2013 at the end. I don't know if you can see the figure. It's 806,142. Okay. So that's the healthcare related capital. You know, that's the money that's there for healthcare, which the, like I said, the Clinical Commissioning Group can draw down on for funding for GP practices and healthcare generally in and around areas that might need that.
Sorry, Henry.
Sorry.
Councillor Paling got a question again.
This again, I'm sorry, it's a comment, Henry. I just don't see how a somewhere in the practice they can spend 22,692 on capital unless they're putting a lot of their own. What can that amount of money do? It won't build an extension on my house.
No, just for an historical context, I'm going to go back to Bestwood St Albans Ward, for example. A few years ago, the Clinical Commissioning Group were panicking because they had some money that they hadn't spent, that they needed to spend, because obviously if the money doesn't get spent, we set up a health-related locality post for that area, and we set up a local group which Councillor Ellis will know about and has been very much involved with. So we set up like a health-related localities initiative, and that was using Section 106 monies for health-related issues within the Westwood St Albans ward, and I do believe they've got a small amount left from that still. So it might be that they come up with other innovative ideas, because they don't always, sometimes it's not always practical to use it to spend on a new GP practice or a new GP. It might be something else that they want to look at in terms of tackling health inequalities in a local area. Again, it's something that the CCG needs to discuss, I think, with council more widely. Thank you. Okay, sorry. So the next question I got was, how has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the mental health of residents, and in particular how the idea of social prescribing may assist? The impacts of the pandemic on mental health nationally. Okay, and this source is from Mind, which is the mental health charity. So 58% of people receiving benefits told Mind that their mental health was currently poor. Around a third of adults and young people said their mental health has got worse, much worse since March 2020. 1 in 5 adults did not seek support during the pandemic because they didn't think their problem was serious enough. 9 in 10 young people, 88%, said that loneliness has made their mental health much worse during the pandemic. And this is sourced from Mind, which is the mental health charity. Again, this is sourced from Mind as well. The number of young people with mental health problems has risen dramatically from 1 in 9 to 1 in 6, and 1.6 million adults are on the waiting list for mental health treatment, and a further 8 million can't get onto the waiting list, and that was sourced this March, which is last month actually. Okay, so in terms of the impacts in Gedling, it is difficult to determine the full impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on the mental health of residents in the Borough of Gedling. However, the latest data showing the prevalence of depression in the borough recorded by GP practice is below the national average, but has seen some increases in parts of the borough according to 2020-2021 figures. For example, figures are higher than the national average for the Netherfield area, and other areas within the borough with high social deprivation indices will have been hard hit by the pandemic. And this is sourced from the Quality Outcome Framework, or the QOF, prevalence of patients with depression for the year 2020-2021. I'm just going to talk quickly about long COVID and mental health and physical needs. So, long COVID, National Health Service England issued a directed enhanced service DES in 2021-2022 for long COVID. This provided general practices with training staff to identify patients with long COVID that would benefit from onward referral to the long COVID clinics for support. And these clinics support both physical and mental health needs. During the 12 months to mid-March 2022, the total number of referrals made to the long COVID clinic in Nottinghamshire, so it's Nottinghamshire, are 1,169, and the CCG, Clinical Commissioning Group Nottinghamshire, are awaiting confirmation from NHS England as to whether this DES will be extended into 2022-2023. Okay, so I'm going to move on to social prescribing. Okay, so social prescribing can help improve patient mental health and wellbeing by connecting patients to activities in the community. Social prescribing teams were implemented across South Nottinghamshire, so when that's sort of Broxtowe, Rushcliffe and Gedling jointly in 2020, commissioned by the primary care networks. The local social prescribing provider for Gedling area is Age UK, and Age UK employs social prescribing link workers who work directly with patients to signpost them into community activity. In order for social prescribing to work, capacity building of grassroots community groups is essential. To support the NHS social prescribing link workers, Gedling Borough has been funded by the South Notts Integrated Care Partnership, which is newly emerging, to host the community development coordinator, support and develop local groups across South Notts. The post has directly advised groups, supported them to access funding and developed networks within which these groups can offer mutual support and advice to one another and form enhanced relationships with the linked workers. Okay, so I'm just going to continue. Despite COVID-19, the Community Development Coordinator at Gedling has brokered positive relationships between linked workers and community groups and established and coordinated a South Notts community development structure. 21 community groups identified and shared between social prescribing linked workers and community networks. 221, sorry, it's because it's cut off up here, sorry, 221. 50 groups accepting signposts from linked workers, community hubs such as Arnold Methodist Church Mental Health Befriending Service, feeling more confident in taking referrals, helping groups reopen after lockdown and understanding the signposting process. Okay, sorry.
Go on then, Marge.
This is a real question. Can I ask who the community development worker is? I can't.
Oh, crikey.
I'm sorry, Henry. I didn't mean to.
Lance, sorry, help me
Yeah, I'll
out.
come. Yeah, it's Abele Omobamawo. So she sits in the communities team at the council. We can share her contact details as well if people want to.
I think that'd be useful. Thank you very much.
To do that, yeah, she's a useful link in terms of local groups and in the work that she's doing.
Yeah,
Thanks, Lance.
that'd be really useful, Lance, thank you. Where did I get to? Right, right, okay. So patients supported to reduce their clinical time at surgeries, Age UK linked workers working with over 2,000 patients by autumn 2021. 17 grassroots groups accessing the South Notts Integrated Care Partnership Growth Fund, 22 groups expanded to work through other funding pots. Community hubs in Netherfield and Calverton now independently recruit and manage their own volunteers. We have a South Notts volunteer telephone befriending project established during COVID-19 with additional volunteers recruited, hundreds of clients registered and across referral systems established between befrienders, linked workers and communities. Okay. So the success of this work has been seen the ICP Integrated Care Partnership provide additional funding in 2022-2023 for an additional community linked worker coordinator. The council is working in partnership with Rushcliffe Community and Voluntary Services to implement the additional resource. And this will further support community groups across South Notts to support residents with their health and well-being. Any questions? Sorry. No. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the final question, which was around temporary accommodation. So what is the council doing to reduce its use of temporary accommodation? So there's quite a lot of information to go through here. So I'll just give a quick overview. So following Cabinet approval in January 2021 regarding the temporary accommodation options appraisal, officers have been working tirelessly viewing suitable accommodation within the borough. The council has now taken ownership of 6 properties located within the borough and aims to have all of these available in the oncoming weeks to those households who are homeless or at risk of becoming homeless following the completion of some essential works. Work continues to identify and secure 2 remaining properties required, but since Christmas market's been it's slowed down considerably. The number of properties within the required price bracket has been limited. Viewings have been undertaken, but only a few specific properties have been identified as suitable following last and final offers. The council has been unsuccessful with its financial offer. Demand continues to outstrip supply and the market is very competitive with high numbers of viewings per listed property. So I'm just going to go on to properties that have been purchased. So we have 1 times 1 bed in the Arnold Westwood area, 3 times 2 bed, Arnold, 2 in Arnold, 1 in Top Valley, 2 times 3 bed, 1 in Gedling, 1 in Colton. And we have managed to purchase a mixture of properties, not flats, and they're all freehold, spread across the borough. The project is also current on budget despite overall increase in prices since January. And we have I mean, it's obvious we have a national and local affordable housing crisis, and the council its main priority is reducing expenditure on bread and breakfast accommodation by securing our own temporary accommodation.
Got a question from Councillor Sam Smith.
Yep.
Thanks for that, Henry. And the last bullet point there is something we've spoke about quite a lot in this committee, is that we do need to reduce our spend on temporary accommodation B&B, I think over £200,000 year on year. And the need for that, as pointed out by the reports we get from the Chief Exec every time, is that it's the bigger 4 or 5 bedroom properties that we can't get, and therefore we put those families in B&Bs. Now, it's great that we're buying properties, but I don't think the ones we're buying is a solution to the problem. Is there anything we're doing for the bigger properties?
I think the biggest problem with 5-bedroom houses is the cost. The cost is so costly to do that. It would take our budget up pretty much. Even that additional bit of money that we get from the government for tackling aspects of rough sleeping, so it would just chew it up very quickly. Because those properties are just cost prohibitive, so expensive. So it's much more cost effective for us in reducing the bed and breakfast budget by looking at the three bedroom, say for example 3-bedroom houses. It's not ideal for everybody, but it's a lot better than being stuffed in a hotel or a bed and breakfast. That is the last resort. We shouldn't be doing that at all. No council should be putting people into bed and breakfast. Should be the very last resort. Our team at Aspen are working tirelessly to resolve those issues. They're working flat out to try and get those issues resolved and sorted. I'm just going to go on to a few more, which sort of answers some of those questions. So further progress is also being made to secure several Nottinghamshire County Council caretaker bungalows. Properties on a 2-year lease to further strengthen the temporary accommodation portfolio. These properties have remained vacant for quite a long time, actually, several years. And more detailed inspections have recently been undertaken by officers from Gedling Borough Council and Nottinghamshire County Council. Of the 4 units inspected, it's felt that 2 initially could be utilised in the short term. It's saying that both internal and external works have been highlighted and will be required before people can take occupation. Heads of terms need drawing up to identify responsibility, but overall it was felt that the county should be responsible for external works and Gedling those internal works. It is hoped that this can be finalised in the oncoming weeks, and the properties can be made available very shortly, actually. I know there's ongoing work on that at this moment in time. Okay. The other 2 properties need more complex works undertaken, and it's been agreed to complete the first 2 properties as a pilot exercise and utilise any good practice on any others required. A further 2 properties located in the Hucknall are available and are to be considered once the first 2 properties are fully completed. Okay, so I'm going to talk about proactive work that's ongoing to reduce our need for temporary accommodation. So activities to reduce homelessness and need for temporary accommodation. So we continue to try and primarily prevent households from being made homeless rather than deal with the case once this has occurred. And to aid this, we continue to improve and investigate new proactive and prevention measures. So I'm going to go through a list of things that we're doing. So we have the Call Before You Serve, CB4US, a scheme funded to work with landlords to establish what can be achieved to avoid a notice being served and enforced. We have Google, I think that should read Google Ads, sorry. A means of targeting our customers. Therefore, when anyone with the borough uses a Google search relating to evictions or related to them, signpost them to Gedling Borough Council's webpage for advice, contact numbers and so forth. Also signposts landlords to the Call Before You Serve service. Advice and support in doctors' surgeries. A pilot scheme ran during COVID to help people who approach their doctor for help and may need signpost into housing needs or other welfare support services. We've got a successful joint funding bids were made in 2021 between Gedling Borough Council, Rushcliffe Borough Council and Broxtowe Borough Council to secure a total 15 units across the 3 districts for those individuals with a history of or recently found rough sleeping. Each self-contained unit will also have wraparound support provided by Framework. Following the domestic violence bill, work has been undertaken and new funded roles will be created within Juno Women's Aid. Funding has been provided to aid the Council's Sanctuary Scheme aimed at helping victims remain in their properties safely. And I do believe that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Henry. That's been really, really interesting. Councillor Murray.
I just had one question that I'm afraid I didn't get around to asking when you were on the CCG section. Can I just clarify? It's probably my, well, certainly my lack of knowledge. As far as the CCG goes, this document that you've handed around refers to the NHS Nottingham and Nottinghamshire CCG. And your slides referred to South Nottinghamshire CCG. Is there one CCG for the whole county?
Yes, there
or is it divided up?
No, there is one CCG for the whole of Nottinghamshire and Nottingham, and then they have integrated care partnerships across the Nottinghamshire Authority, and then you have your primary care networks within these integrated care partnerships, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's right. Is that right, Lance? I'm sure that's right. I'm sure I've got that right.
Yeah, that's right. I think Henry referred to what's called the integrated care system. So there's a transitional process,
Yeah.
I suppose is the best way to describe it at the moment, we're into more of a strategy structure for that. But effectively, across that Nottinghamshire structure, it is divided up into localities, and those localities will be the city area. There's South Notts, which Henry's obviously made some reference to in his presentation. So that does generally cover Gedling, Rushcliffe and Broxtowe plus Hucknall, and that comes down to your question earlier about the unusual boundaries. And then we've also got Mid Nottinghamshire, and as I said, well, actually the Ravenshead GP practice kind of fits into that Mid Nottinghamshire structure, unusually in terms of our boundary. And then you've got Bassetlaw as well in the north. So that's kind of how the governance arrangements are going to work. And as Henry referred to, those primary care networks, those smaller kind of structures fit underneath that.
So can I ask you, Henry, just in light of that, do you think is there a mismatch in the terms of, as it were, so the bulk of the residents of my ward, therefore, you have very little clout in terms of delivery of healthcare and relations with the local healthcare, because that's matters that relate to Mid-Nottinghamshire. I mean, for example, the consultation in respect of planning. So if there's a planning submission in Ravenshead to build more than 10 houses, it would relate to the Abbey Medical Group's provision of services, but your involvement would be limited. I'm a bit concerned that there's a gap there.
Yeah, I think what I do have access to quite a lot of people within the clinical commissioning group who I can liaise with in around that central Notts area of Ravenshead to provide, if I can give you some information, if you like, I can ask for that information and then I can provide that to you if that would help. So what I can do is I can go back to Joe Lunn at the CCG and ask for information around Ravenshead in terms of capacity, in terms of GP capacity and how that relates to developments that might happen in that area. So I can ask that question. Again, it's probably a good idea for them to come here as well, but I can find that out for you at some point. If you email me with that question, I can forward that to the respective person that would be able to provide you some information regarding that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Oh, Martin Smith.
Yes, and I think likewise, Henry, I don't think you mentioned Newstead Village either. I think that's probably, again, under another area.
I think that comes under the Ashfield area. So it's, am I right in saying that would be sort of linked in with Hucknall lands?
Yeah. So again, there's a link with Mid-Notts. I think one of the things, some of this is around patient registration as well. So as we know, sometimes patients can be registered in Ravenshead is likely it's going to be in the Ravenshead practice, isn't it? Newstead, some of those patients could look towards Kirkby, Annesley or Hucknall as well. So bizarrely enough, that then those residents can cut across those two CCD boundaries. So I think it's an interesting question, and as Henry says, maybe it's worth exploring just around those communities, around how we kind of engage and ensure the representations there, really.
Hang on, I think Henry's just finding some information for you. Marge, have you got another question? Go ahead.
I don't think it's for Henry, though. I think it's more a point, perhaps, for planning, because if I was thinking about the Linby development that has only recently come, and I don't recall anything for health in that. Perhaps as a separate notification for that area of monies appointed. I've no idea if you know. Linby, the new big development right on the Hucknall border, I wonder if the notification of monies awarded have gone to Kirkby to Ashfield, rather than us being informed. It's because of that border issue.
Again, I need to ask the CCG. In terms of, coming back to Martin, sorry, in terms of, I think actually the Borough on PCM, which is the Bestwood Village, Papwick and Linby, might actually serve parts of Newstead as well. But I think they're more likely to be served by that mid-knots PCN. And again, that comes back to your point around the contributions up in and around that area at Linby. Again, if you email me, I can forward that to the CCG for Joe to look at and get a question back. Sorry, get an answer back to that question. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel Ellis.
Yes, at the risk of making your life even more difficult, Henry, can you please add St Albans into that mix? Because Bestwood Village will come under this one. But St Albans, there is no GP practice in St Albans, so we will come under the city one.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and it would be useful to get information about that.
I can find that information out, but I think, if I'm not mistaken, quite a lot of the Warren Hill area is actually served by some of the GP practices in Bestwood Park Estate and also within the Top Valley area. And I know one of those GP practices recently, I think they closed. I think that's one on as you're going up towards, is it Bestwood Park Drive around there?
Absolutely, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's been very interesting from Henry with his very wide portfolio about the healthcare and about the temporary accommodation. It's been very interesting. Thank you for your thorough presentation, Henry, and answering all the questions. I think that was a very good suggestion about getting more input from the CCG. But we'll perhaps have a bit of a chat about that when we talk about the Scrutiny work programme later on. Okay?
Just say thank you for listening, by the way. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, recommendations. Just a minute. Let me go back to my... Okay. So we're going to talk about the... anything but potential inclusion in future work programme, as I mentioned, with the CCG. So, I don't know, maybe in the first instance, would it be better just to get somebody from the CCG here to answer some questions rather than have like a working group? Because I'm not quite sure what we can achieve for that. It might be just nicer to have the questions first. Is that what people are thinking? I can see Marge and Rachel nodding. Michael Boyle.
Yes, I would agree, because it was a responsible question I asked. I think that's the right way forward.
Okay. So we'll look at the work programme later on where we might like to where we might like to put that in. Whether we put it in the next time, we'll see. And obviously it will depend on their availability as well, of course. So perhaps we can ask Emma to ask Henry for the right person to come and talk to us about those issues. And again, we could prepare some questions for them ahead of time, I'm sure, to help them. Okay, so now we're going to move on to the carbon management strategy and action plan update. Now, we had mentioned this before, that we'd like an update about it. So we've got Sim Durra, our new climate change officer, with us, and Sam Palmer and Mel Cryer. So over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just a recap on the Council's carbon management strategy to set a bit of context. In November 2019, the Council declared a climate emergency and set a goal to become carbon neutral by 2030. Councillors unanimously agreed to produce an action plan to take steps to reduce carbon emissions, recognising the serious immediate and future impacts of global warming, and committing to take action at the local level on its own carbon footprint, whilst at the same time working with local businesses, charity and the public sector to reduce theirs. Following the subsequent COVID-19 epidemic, on the 17th of March 2022, so 2 years later, the Council approved the consulted upon carbon management strategy and action plan. The new strategy builds on the Council's work to date on low carbon interventions and improvements to the local environment. It sets out how the Council will continue to reduce its current carbon footprint across the borough, taking into account its fleet vehicle emissions and the energy used to power its heat and offices, leisure centres and other buildings, and other actions like encouraging sustainable travel of staff. All councils across the country have been graded on their climate action plans and activities to date, with the organisation Climate Emergency UK assessing authorities across 9 key sectors. Councils are then given a percentage on how well they are meeting their targets and addressing these individual areas. And Gedling Borough Council has been recognised for its actions, the ones we've done to date, and ambitions to tackle climate emergency, along with Rushcliffe, who both were graded the highest in the 7 Nottinghamshire councils, with a score of 46% each. Now, in order to see how much work is required to reach our target by 2030, the Council's carbon footprint baseline has been estimated by APSI, the Association of Public Service Employees. And the Council's carbon footprint baseline has been established, and an additional piece of work was undertaken on our grey fleet, undertaken through a Gp6 staff travel survey. This will enable us to both monitor and show that we are reducing our emissions as we move into the future. Now, as a council, we influence both internally and externally. In terms of internal influence, we control our public estate, which includes buildings, fleet, housing, parks and woodlands. We work to align procurement and commissioning with net zero. We embed climate action in decision-making and when we prepare business cases. And we ensure the provision of training and the building of skills for climate change and understanding of the energy system. And externally, we lead partnerships and support co-designing initiatives. We grow supply chains and develop low-carbon skills and economic growth. We deliver local area energy planning for electric vehicles and heat pumps, solar panels and insulation for walls. We deliver planning policies for net zero. We encourage green transport and active travel, promote consistent recycling and waste collections, and carry out public engagement. And we work to ensure project readiness so that when grants become available, we can access them immediately. So some of the projects we've implemented so far. Buildings, we've installed solar panels at the Civic Centre, at Richard Herod Leisure Centre, at Jubilee Depot. We've installed energy-efficient LED lighting at the Civic Centre, installed pool covers and new energy efficient pumps in our leisure centres, carried out energy efficient window replacement programmes, which include the council's civic centre. In terms of car parks, we've installed LED street lighting and electric vehicle charging points at High Street in Arnold, Fredericks Avenue, Carlton, Haywood Road, South, Mapley, and Morrison Street in Netherfield. In terms of waste and recycling, we're working with our county-wide partners to reduce contamination levels for recycling while increasing recycling rates, and there'll be a campaign starting shortly which will reflect that. And in terms of fleet, we're currently trialling a number of electric vehicles to see how they can work within this area. We are unfortunate because we're a very hilly borough, and as a result, batteries don't last as long as they normally would in, say, a London borough, which is a lot more flat and less climbing hills to have to do. And then in terms of parks and open spaces, we've facilitated a solar panel farm at Gedling Country Park and have a large programme of planting new trees and are developing new wildflower bee-friendly pollinator areas. In terms of planning, we're pushing developers to install electric vehicle charging points as standard on new homes, and our local plan has a number of policies on climate change, energy efficient designs and renewable energy generation. So I'll hand on now to Sim, our new climate change officer.
Hello. Yes, I'm on. Great. Okay, so my name's Sim Giora. I am the new Climate Change Officer. And you've probably seen this picture of me somewhere, hopefully. So I joined the role at Gedling Borough Council in December 2001. So I've been here for just over 5 months now. And the reason I decided to have this photo opportunity was so everyone got to know exactly who I am, because I think it's really important that everyone internally knows who I am, so they can find out who to contact when someone mentions climate change or anyone mentions sustainability. I think it's really important visually that people can put name to face. So when I first started, I did contact comms to say, could I get my photo put on the intranet? And I thought this was a great opportunity to actually promote practice what I preach, because I am a cyclist. So I used my Brompton as a prompt there to really sort of say that we need action here. We have got a climate emergency. So I also used this picture externally for March's Energy Agency, and they are supporting communities throughout Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire and throughout the Midlands, also Staffordshire. It's a charity, so that was another reason I used that photo opportunity, because it was a wider reach. So it reached out to communities, local authorities such as Nottinghamshire, Staffordshire and Derbyshire. And just to give you an example of this, I attended an event in February for Cycling UK, where I wanted to gain more information about grants that were available. And someone spotted me from a community group in Chesterfield. They'd seen this photograph and they were really impressed that a climate officer was actually using their bicycle to promote sort of climate action. And they actually wrote to Chesterfield Borough Council and suggested their climate officer should do the same. So I've decided that from right at the beginning, I thought it was really important, as I said, to engage with our internal departments. So as a result, I decided to find out about relevant funding and share that information via the Gedling community newsletter. And that has included things like the Cycling UK, which I mentioned. I attended an event and I got the information about a grant. So obviously I promoted that on the newsletter. I've also managed to undertake funding, to promote funding about climate action grants, allotment grants, so they've all gone into the latest community initiative newsletter. Try to link into businesses as well. So we've got a newsletter that goes out to businesses. So when opportunities arise, I share that information. I'll give you an example of that. We had Energy for Business via Nottingham University that were offering grants available for businesses. So I offered that information. Also, we had an electric vehicle training course via the Energy Saving Trust. Although we didn't have anything too local, the closest one was Leicester, so we actually highlighted that, the fact that there was a training workshop available in Leicester. There was also information that are linking with EHOs, environmental health officers, looking at ideas and campaigns to incorporate businesses to reduce their carbon emissions. So going forward, I'd like to do more work with people within the council and obviously outside the council stakeholders who we can work with to get that information to businesses. And I thought it was really important to actually go out to our communities. So I've actually been out to our schools. It's been a first visit for a bin lorry to visit one of our schools in the area, which was Robert Miller's Primary School. Sorry, it was Robert Mellors Primary School. And really, it just gave a notion of how to see how our bin lorry operates. So we actually have the operatives there giving a demo, find out what happens to the waste. It was really important that children were engaged. They asked lots of questions, and it was finding out exactly what materials go into each bin, because obviously I think the staff were confused about what goes into various bins, because obviously they live in different areas, might not be within Gedling. So it's really important to try and get that encouragement and education to the schools. We got very positive feedback from the school and the welcome me back. They would like to work towards their Eco Schools National Award. Well, actually, it's an international award, so I would like to hopefully in the future be working with them to gain that award. We've also had the Great British Spring Clean that ran from the 25th of March to the 10th of April. And really, my role here was to encourage schools to get involved. So I emailed out all the schools within the borough to take part, to obviously protect the environment, to take pride of the area, really. It was all about taking pride of doing that litter pick. And actually, I got involved with 5 schools, so I actively supported them on the day. So as you can see, we went out, we took lots of equipment, so the litter picks, the bags, and we picked up lots of litter. So that ranged from things like plastic bottles, crisp packets. We actually found quite a lot of face masks, so that's a change in litter now, and cigarette butts, which I was quite surprised about. So yeah, various types of waste were picked up on those particular days. And again, we received really positive feedback. And also note, I did actually loan out equipment to schools as well. So those schools that couldn't partake on the days that I was available, they were given the equipment to loan out so they could take it in their own time, undertake the activity in their own time. They also just were very positive about their about how we were approaching it, really. So we're really happy with that. So who have I met so far? I think it was really important at the start of the presentation. I did mention my photograph, but I think it's so important that I did that because my role is really to work with internal departments within Gedling Borough Council. So that was the reason for that photo shoot, as I mentioned. I've worked with local community groups, Gedling Climate Action Group, Burton Joyce Climate Group, Kids Against Plastic. So there's a picture of me with one of the girls from Kids Against Plastic, Ella Meeks, And then I've met up with the leader, Councillor Clark, and the Chief Executive, Mike Hill, just to give an overall view of how I'm going to be approaching the next 12 months. And I also recently met with Age UK. So you're probably all aware that we have Men in Sheds on our site. So I'd really like to promote Men in Sheds more and see how we can actually work with them more to promote their work. Because obviously they're encouraging recycling, reuse scheme. So again, it's how we can link in with other organisations. So I mentioned I've worked with the Burton Joyce group. That was really through meetings, and it was all virtual. So I thought it was really important that I actually got out to meet people face to face. So I've actually put together a communications plan and events and activities calendar for the year. So we had an idea of what we can involve ourselves with over the next year. So, for example, you're probably aware, or some of you may not be, of was Earth Day a few days ago. It's just knowing those various events throughout the year. And I think that's really important to have those dates and events available where we can partake in those. I did get involved with the Burton Joyce community event, which was 2 weeks ago. It was well attended. We had, you can see one of our banners there with the green rewards. And the idea was really to get people signed up to the Green Reward scheme. I actually took a tablet out so we could actually sign people up on the day. And we had 15 people sign up, which was great. And I spoke to probably over 40 people that day. I also had a little activity, which was the solar car. So Dylan there, who's a young engineer, made this solar car, which was really, again, it was an engaging tool to use to get children involved, but also actually adults were really impressed with this activity. So I didn't take any photographs of adults doing the activity, but it went down really well. Okay, so we've got the strategy, so the Carbon Management Strategy and Action Plan. This was in consultation when I actually came into post. So I came into post on the 1st of December, and the consultation started on the 5th of November until the 4th of January. So I put a report together on the results. So I collated all the results and put a report on the consultation results. I also put together an equality impact assessment, and the report went to Cabinet and was approved on the 17th of March. So, time for action. So, in the consultation, we obviously consulted on the various actions. They were some of them were slightly amended, and as a result, we've now got a more concise action plan. We've got over 100 actions. The action plan sets out the objectives, the actions, the timescales, and the lead and key partners. So really, my role will be there to facilitate these actions, supporting strong collaboration within and across each department. And that's why it's really important that people are aware of my role, because I need to bring people together to be more creative and get this effective delivery, because we have got a climate emergency, and it's really important we get cracking with these actions. So I'm now going to pass you on to Sam. Thank you.
Thank you, Sim. I'm Sam Palmer. I'm the Food, Health and Housing Manager, and Sim, who you've just heard from, is based within my team in the Public Protection Service. I also report directly to Mel Cryer, the Head of Environment. So as Sim says, I'm just going to give you a brief overview of one of the actions that we're currently working on within my area of responsibility, and that is the action to maximise available funding and promote schemes to help retrofit housing within the borough, prioritising low EPC households. So we've got a scheme down in Netherfield, which is ongoing at the moment. It's called the Local Authority Delivery Phase 2. So we're currently working to deliver measures to almost 89 homes in the ward. We've prioritised the measures at external wall insulation, which is what these photographs are of external wall insulation being installed, and solar panels. So we've got approximately 34 external wall insulation schemes going in, and then in the region of 50 to 55 solar panels. These are targeted at low EPC or low energy performance certificate households, those with a rating of D or below, and the funding is targeted to move them up to D or above. The funding is also targeted at lower income households, so it's households with a combined income of 30,000 or less. And we've been running that currently. The scheme is ongoing at the moment, and we're due to deliver by the end of March. End of June is the end of that scheme. I've got here some quotes from a customer, a happy customer, Mrs. M, who had solar panels installed to a property in Netherfield. It's believed the property will save £365 a year on their electricity bill, and she's also got the savings of the £6,000 capital cost from not having to pay for the solar panels. So Mrs. M, she said the scheme lived up to expectations. She was so grateful she got the panels for free. She switched to a special solar panel deal with her energy company, so that's perfect. She now feels more up to date with generating her own energy, and she's already recommended the scheme to a neighbour and is now in line to get theirs installed too. So that's just some feedback. Mrs. M didn't want to go on camera, so we're not able to get a photo, but I'm sure if you visit the ward, you'll see the panels that are in place. What have we got next? So we've just submitted a proposal for the next phase of funding for retrofit work. So that's under the Sustainable Warmth competition. So this is split into two lots of funding. So there's the Home Upgrade Grant, which is for properties that are off the gas network. And we're looking to target that towards the Newstead Village area because it's an ex-mining community. There are people that are likely to be off the gas network. And then we've also got the Local Authority Delivery Phase 3, which we're looking to target in Netherfield. So we're looking on these schemes to improve up to 69 homes with measures including external wall insulation, solar panels, loft, and 6 air source heat pumps. I should mention this particular wave of funding does not cover social housing. The previous scheme, or the scheme that we're currently ending, does include solar and does include social. So we're actually installing measures in 20 jigsaw properties at the moment in Netherfield. So I'm going to hand you back to Mel, who's going to finish off the presentation.
Thank you, Sam. So you'll see some great work going on from the two officers over there. In terms of future work we've got coming up, EV charging points at the Civic Centre. There's 4 going in just opposite the entrance, and then 4 more going up at the Gedling Country Park car park area. And then we're also working to install some new thermal windows at the Civic Centre. That's a project that will be taking place shortly. And I will be working to transition. We can't move instantly to electrification of our fleet or hydrogenation of our fleet. So what we're doing is we're transitioning by using biofuel, hydro-treated vegetable oil, HVO in other words, which is about 90% a reduction in carbon moving forward. So that will have a significant impact internally. Yeah, that's some of the good work that we're undertaking currently, both externally within the borough and internally as an organisation. So from my point of view, it's any questions you might have at all.
Yeah, Michael Boyle.
Yeah, this is possibly a question for Seema, I don't know. But one question I had, in the borough, we can do and we can showcase the kind of good work we've got planned. And that can be very useful for everybody, for schools, for partners and so on. But it's the bridging of that to ensure that the commensurate work is done in small and medium enterprises. That seems to be important to me. And I wondered whether you had any thoughts on that, or whether that's in your sort of plans going forward.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I would like to raise awareness through, I mentioned the EHOs, the Environmental Health Officers, because they obviously go out to businesses as part of their visits, and it'd be great to have some sort of scheme running where we can try and reduce the carbon emissions for businesses through that way. So that's something I will be working towards. Is that okay?
Yeah, thanks very much. I can't see anybody. Oh, Councillor Elwood, sorry.
Can I just add on the last point, sorry. We've also, with environmental health officers inspecting food businesses, we'd like to look at food miles and the sustainability from food produce. So there is some national initiatives that are being developed on that. So we'd like to develop that in the coming year or next couple of years. Okay.
Councillor Elwood.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, just going back to the decarbonisation of the fleet, so to speak. Presumably, eventually, we're looking at electronic and hydrogen-powered vehicles. Going forward, is there going to be an issue with the Jubilee depot, with electrical capacity and other things, and presumably you need a hydrogen hub somewhere? I mean, is that site suitable, or will the borough need to look for somewhere else?
You're quite right to identify that. It is an asset we're looking at this moment in time. So the HVO will transition us over the next 3 to 4 years, but we are looking at our assets currently. Jubilee depot is dated now. It's an old depot. It would cost quite a lot to upgrade it, to put an electric charging infrastructure in there, or drop hydrogen tanks into the ground and things like that. So that's forming part of an overarching strategy that Eugene's working on currently, to look at all our assets across the board holistically and then decide how we want to move forward with that. Because, yeah, as you've raised, it's an old depot and perhaps not fit for purpose unless it's repurposed moving forward, which obviously will involve funding to move forward with that.
Okay, Councillor Creamer.
Yeah, thank you. My question actually links quite nicely into that. With the decarbonisation of the biofuel in transition, have you any idea how long the transition is likely to be? I mean, it's not quite looking into crystal ball, but do we have a timetable stroke target from when the transition will be complete?
Even with HVO diesel, they can't guarantee it. It's in such short supply. So what they're saying presently is they'll supply you with HVO, but occasionally a tank load might be normal diesel, but thankfully it's interchangeable so they can mix it. And this is all about producers. There aren't enough producers out there producing the HVO diesel at present. But that's where we've got to head moving forward. And I'm thinking 3 to 4 years. And then in the meantime, we'll have looked at our assets, we'll know where we're heading. And then it's going to be a lot easier from my point of view if it is a brand new depot, because then you can put that electric charging infrastructure in straight off. You can drop the tanks in, they're all ready to go. Retrofitting an older depot is going to be harder because you've still got to keep the operations moving all the time around the works taking place. But I would, within 3 to 4 years, we've got to be at the stage where we know where we're heading. It will be a mix of hydrogen, so the freighters are likely to be hydrogen powered, whereas the smaller transits and caddy vans are going to be electric charge vehicles moving into the future. So, yeah, we will update the strategies working document. I suspect I'm going to be back to Scrutiny in a year's time to update you on where we're progressing, and that's when I'll have those opportunities to let you know where the future is moving in terms of the depot, and also then the time frames for installing hydrogen tanks and electrifying the fleet. At the moment, we've got about 3 electric charging points in the depot, and we charge up some caddy vans, but clearly not enough at present, and we need to accelerate that moving forward in the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, Martin Smith.
Yes, thank you. First of all, a comment to Sim. Welcome to Gedling Borough Council. I don't think I've met you before. I'd be very interested to see you on your bicycle around Newstead Abbey ward, or perhaps you'll be thinking of getting the Pronto bus up to our patch. But on a serious note, whenever you're in Newstead Abbey ward, I'd very much like to meet with you, because I think a lot of things that you've talked about are very low cost initiatives. You know, Ravenshead Parish Council a few weeks ago put on another litter pick with 25 volunteers. Gedling provides some blue bags and collect the rubbish, but you know, it's pretty fairly cost effective, that is. And just a suggestion to you, you've spoken to schools, Newstead Youth Club I'm sure would welcome a visit from you as well. So that's just a bit of an idea. But going back to some of the things that Mel's talked about, of course, we are reminded here on a regular basis that Gedling Borough Council hasn't got any money. I'm sure these initiatives that you've talked about, Mel, are very costly. Really a question, are they going to save Gedling Borough Council any money, or are they designed really just to save the planet, or can we do both?
I hope we can do both. I mean, ultimately, we've got to save the planet, otherwise we won't be here. And that's the priority as far as I'm concerned. Now, sometimes that costs, and we've got to pay out more than we would. For instance, HVO diesel, 29p a litre more than standard diesel. You've got to pay in order to reduce those carbon emissions at the end of the day. But you're right to identify the lack of funding, hence the strategic review of all our assets moving forward, so we make those right choices moving into the future. There is some government funding available at the moment, and there's likely to be more funding available as we move into the future. But at the moment, I'm not seeing it, I have to admit.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to come to Councillor Creamer. Sorry, I missed you before. Were you indicating, Jim?
No, you.
Oh,
and
sorry.
I've asked me a question. I think it was.
I've got a list here. I've got Marge and Rachel coming up now. Paul and Sam and Sandra. Marge.
Like Martin, I'd like to extend your invitation to quite a few community groups that I'm aware of. I'm especially aware that downstairs at the moment, unless they've finished, Arnold Local Area Forum, which is a conglomeration of the local groups, was meeting, and I think that would be a especially good forum. The chair has also had to miss the meeting because she's here. But I was also thinking of all the U3As of the area, because they're large groups with lots of interest groups within them. And I think a session for each large group, so that the very important interest groups can actually take your suggestions further, would be very useful.
Yeah, I appreciate that and I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so can I say at this point, in case anybody else's point was just about some groups, maybe you could ask everybody, all the members of groups they're aware of that would like to be contacted by you. Yeah. So, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. And also, I'd like to extend a welcome to you, Tim. As a non-cyclist, I'd love to be a cyclist, I'm very interested in your concerns about cycling, and in particular about road safety for cyclists, which is going to encourage the more timid among us onto the roads. I'm particularly in favour of separating, wherever possible, cyclists from motorised vehicles. And I'm just wondering, I know you've got to work with other people, like people on the county council and so on, but whether there's any plans afoot.
Not that I'm aware of. Unfortunately, this is something that Notts County Council will have to take forward. There's been active travel funds available through the government. And I've got to say, the City Council have been very proactive with that, but unfortunately, not with the county as much. And I completely agree with segregated cycle lanes, but it's something that we'll push for and we'll try and work with the county as best we can. But unfortunately, the power is with the county on this one, but we will work with them. I'll encourage it and obviously have those conversations.
If I can just add as well, we will work through planning. So on new developments, we'll make sure that there are cycle and walkways within those developments. At Top Wickay, we've already consulted on that. The Green Lung project will see the introduction of a new cycle walking way from Carlton through to Gedling Country Park and then on into the Dumballs if people want to go that far. So wherever we can influence, we are doing. But yes, it's within the constraints of the fact that we're not the Highways Authority and County Council are.
Okay, next I've got Paul Feeney.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Just wondered if we ever thought about the purchasing of biogas, because I was involved with the project a bit ago where we bought biogas, and all the buses in the whole city now run on biogas, so we made quite a considerable cost saving, over a few million, to say it went to biogas from diesel. And other thing is, do we do an audit survey of all the buildings, environmental survey of all the buildings? Because I notice here we've got single glazing up the top there. I mean, it's really the amount of energy that must be going out of that. It must be the same probably with lots of other buildings. So do we do surveys of our buildings and take photographs as we ought to say how much energy is actually going through the infrastructure?
Will be taking place as part of the carbon benchmarking exercise, because all the buildings' electricity usage has been monitored and gas usage, so we will be looking to install, say, the thermal windows and see that benchmark moving down. Have you... Well, do you want to... Yeah, because I was aware Sim's more knowledgeable in that area than I am.
Yeah, so as part of my role, I asked exactly the same question. And as far as I know, and I have got the evidence, I've got these reports, there has been reports undertaken for this building and 3 or 4 other buildings within our remit, so we do have that information. Some of them are a bit dated, but the last report for this particular building was 2021, so it's fairly recent.
Of course, one of the main ones is, of course, swimming pools use phenomenal amounts of energy, and there's really good environmental ways to cut down that energy bill for them. They use colossal amounts of gas.
Yeah, one of the things the leisure centres do have, which I think is fantastic, is the pool covers, which saves a significant amount of energy overnight. And I'm aware that all of the leisure centres have those pool covers. And again, we have got reports, but they have dated back quite a long time ago. And obviously, leisure services are at a point where they're looking at what they're going to be doing in the future with those services. So I think for now, it's not something we're going to be considering straight away. I think we've got other priorities. Absolutely, yeah, can't agree more. It's looking at renewables and really looking at how we look at our supply as well, whether we look at our supplier as well. But obviously, at the moment, that's a mute subject. We can't sort of change suppliers as such, but that's something, again, that we need to take forward.
Okay. Councillor Sam Smith.
Thank you. I'm pleased, Sim, that your first outing was to Trent Valley, and you're very welcome. The Burton Joyce Climate Action Group, I've engaged with them a lot, of quite active and doing some fab things, particularly for the Jubilee. There's going to be some nice planters coming to the High Street, which is good. I wonder, I think Councillor Ellis touched on this, but Nottinghamshire County Council have appointed an Environment Ambassador who's an elected member of the council, and they have money to spend. They're doing a lot of work around cycling, cycle tracks as well. So I wonder what engagement you've had with them, and if we can help do that. And as well, the 30,000 trees they're planting in Bestwood Country Park as well. That's direct through the work they've set out. So there is money, and I wondered how you're getting on with them for practical help to help the environment.
I have attended various meetings where the county has been present, so I get involved in various discussions depending on that particular meeting. We haven't discussed certain topics, so you mentioned the segregated cycle lanes. They haven't been mentioned as such, but yes, it just depends on the various meetings. Obviously, I've only been in post for a few months, so we haven't covered absolutely everything at the moment. But yes, again, I welcome those conversations, and I think as time passes, we'll progress with further conversations on how we can work towards spending that money if we're successful. I think the latest one was the talks was on electric vehicle points, charging points. And again, we're just waiting for a decision for the county to decide whether they're going to offer that collectively for all the borough councils. So just waiting their decision.
And in terms of trees, we weren't in the first rounding of Trees for Life funding that the County Council ran. That was spent further north in Nottinghamshire on some big areas of woodland, whereas the areas of land that Gedling owned weren't sufficiently large enough. But there's a second round of funding, Trees for Life now, which we are feeding into as part of that, which allows you to join up patches of land into one larger area. So we're availing ourselves of that funding, and we've also been availing ourselves of the Woodland Trust funding and doing lots of whip planting and things like that.
Okay, and I think we'll take this as the final one for now, Sandra.
Okay, thanks. Well done, Sim. Seems you've been doing quite a lot. I just want to ask, are you open to go around the schools, different schools, with the bin men and the lorry again? Because it seems as if the children enjoyed it, and I'm sure the bin men enjoyed talking to the kids and telling the kids everything, and vice versa with the children.
I would love to. The comments that we received back, I forwarded it to Mel and Sam, and the school were very complimentary about the visit. They thought it was really important in terms of educating our next generation. So time will tell how much time I can spend with schools, but obviously the offer is available for schools, because I think at the end of the day, it's our next generation, and we need to make sure that we educate the children.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for the update on the carbon management strategy. I think it's been very interesting, and it's been nice to hear of all the things that are actually going on in this area. Since it seems a long time since we declared the climate emergency, but now, thanks to hopefully we're coming past the worst of COVID and able to do some things in this area. So it's really great, and to have you on board as well, Sim. Welcome. Welcome. Okay, so we're going to move on now to the next item on the agenda, which is the sewage review report, which we asked for at the last meeting and was circulated. We're carrying on a bit on the environmental theme here. So you'll all have had a chance to read the report in the papers. So I think, first of all, has anybody got anything to say? Or I think let me just get to my recommendations on my paper. Hang on. Have a think whether you've got any questions at this point. Okay. Yeah, I think is everybody having the same issues I've got. It's in a different place, isn't it? That's why. Just a minute. Okay. No, I've got it now. So we just got the report, and we've got the recommendation, so to note the different responsibilities of the various agencies that are involved. And we have got the recommendation to form a working group to complete a more thorough review of the waterways and sewage throughout the borough. So, Martin Smith.
Yes, just referring to the working group, I assume that anybody who doesn't put their name forward to be part of the working group will be described by the deputy leader of this council as not being bothered, because I was quite put out in the last full council meeting that members of this committee were described as not being bothered to take part in the last working group. Can I just point out that my allowance is about £4,000 a year. The deputy leader of this council, when all his allowances are added together, come to about £65,000–70,000.
Point of order, Chair.
Yeah, I don't think this is really relevant to this discussion.
Point of order,
Is that what
Chair.
you were going to say, Michael Boyle?
Yeah, I don't think this is relevant for this discussion if we feel we want to adopt the recommendation of a working group, and I'm sure Councillor Smith would want to volunteer to be part of it.
I certainly will do, but just
Okay.
I hope my comments were noted. Thank
That's
you.
good then. Martin Smith wants to be on the working group. Marge?
A point of information, the working groups are open to all members of the council and often to external people too if they wish and have expertise and want to join us.
Yeah.
So, it's not just these people.
Absolutely. We had this discussion beforehand that the working groups will be open to all members of the council. You will be given the opportunity to join the working group, which is, a good... not the cabinet members. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. Rachel Ellis.
Yeah, I was really pleased to see this report and very much welcome it. It opens the door for us to ask some quite challenging questions, I hope, and I would certainly like to support creating a working group with quite wide-ranging remit, I think.
Yep, I think as with any working group, we don't have to spell out the actual direct remit right now. That would come out of the scope of the group, but I think you're right. There's probably quite a few things we could think about. Michael Boyle.
Just to also state how much I welcome this and how much I welcome the fact that we are looking into this in detail as we called for it for full council, and I'll put my name forward for the working group.
Yeah, well, I'd like to be on the working group as well, and I think I will chair that working group. Does anybody else want to say anything at this point? Or we will, Emma will email out, or Ben will email out to members to ask if they'd like to be part of the working group after this meeting, and then it will go on from there. We'll get this started as soon as we can. Okay. Okay. So who's somebody proposing the recommendation? Rachel? Second, Marge? Yeah. Everybody all in favour? Yep. Okay, good. Okay, we'll move on to point number 7 now, which is the scrutiny working group, which you've got in the back of your pack. Okay, do you want to talk to this, Emma?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I was just going to do an update from the report. Just a few amendments on the scrutiny work programme. Normally we have the leader and deputy leader together, so that will be amended. We'll be adding the sewage working group to it, and also I've been speaking to the chief executive about a few months ago. There was an ask for a health provision in the borough working group, so that will be in the next health provision in the borough. So Councillor Wheeler's presentation gave some indication to this, but obviously as a result of that, there's been some questions on bringing other partners in. So I think it would be good if we had a working group to review the whole provision across the borough, but also more specifically, I'm going to see if we can get the CCG to come in as one of the partners that I was speaking about last time to try and give an update on the progress, and then members can put any questions to them directly. So in terms of organisations, so in the draft programme, I've put Jigsaw Homes on there just as an option. I've sent out an email to all the heads of services to try and get a list of all partners that we fund to see if there's anybody that would be appropriate to come and speak to us. And so far I've had ideas from the communities team for a few people, for a few organisations that we fund annually. So. And one of those was Gedling Play Forum. The other one was We Are Here, and then the other one was CA, Notts and District. So it's just to sort of get a feel of the committee's preference, really, so we can invite them in over the next few committees.
Does anybody have any comments? Sandra?
Is there a preference in order? So is everyone happy for us to do Jigsaw Homes first and then go through the list? And my plan was to send out a full list to members once I'd received it from every department, and maybe we could have an email just to confirm and then update the work programme accordingly. Is that okay for members? Pardon? Okay, perfect. So at least they know what they need to bring. So, okay, so if we put Jigsaw to the next meeting, and then we can review accordingly.
So will you be asking for questions ahead of time to go to Jigsaw?
Yeah, so I'll email probably in the next few days, once Jigsaw have confirmed they're able to come on the committee date, and then I'll email members of the whole council for any questions they have to Jigsaw. But apart from that, there's nothing else to add. So if anybody has any questions or comments, I'd welcome them.
Can't see anybody indicating at the moment. Is there anything else to say on this matter? Okay, so that brings to the end. I have no other items which the chair considers urgent. I think we've had a very good meeting with the presentation from Henry and the presentation on the carbon management strategy. I think it's been really interesting. So thank you all for attending, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.